Hey, it's Leo. Welcome to my channel and my second episode in my series on queer book reviews for Shoutout. Shoutout is a non-monetized, volunteer-driven digital media outlet for news, entertainment, politics, arts, and business geared towards the needs and interests of the LGBTQ+ community in the Pacific Northwest. You can find me and other queer creators at facebook.com/shoutoutpdx. With each video, I lift up a different nonprofit that is doing good in the world. This week, I'm going to lift up an organization that knows the healing power of music. I've been listening a lot on repeat this week to a particular song that speaks to me. That is Bobby McFerrin's song, Psalm 23rd, dedicated to his mother, sung by Cantus. I'll link that down below. And I would love to know, what songs do you go to? I definitely also have my go-to dance music, my go-to writing music, my go-to pump-up music, but that's been kind of my go-to soothing, balming my soul music this week. So the organization that I will be donating to, and I encourage you to check them out, like, share, follow, donate as you are inspired, is Bridging Voices. Bridging Voices is a youth chorus for LGBTQ+ youth from 13 through 21. They strive to be a safe and accessible space for youth to find empowerment and expression through music. It's the Portland area's first LGBTQ+ and allied youth chorus and one of the largest in the nation. So again, I'll make a donation and I will put their information down below, and I encourage you to check them out. In my September Shoutout Queer Book Review, I'm excited to bring you 4 books. And in fact, this is a couple of days late because I wanted to squeeze in one last book. So I hope that you find something here that you'll enjoy. We have a story of young Chinese lesbian love, a family coming together in times of grief, a memoir of pursuing the arts, and a letter about race. So let's get into it. First book that I want to talk about is the last book that I finished, which is The Last Night at the Telegraph Club by Malinda. Set in the early 50s, this is the story of 17-year-old Lily Hu, a Chinese American living in Chinatown in San Francisco with her family. She longs to become a human computer and help build rockets. In addition to defying those gender expectations that are particularly strong in her family, she's also discovering that she is attracted to women. She connects with classmate Kathleen Miller over a clipping of a male impersonator at a local bar, and they wind up going together to the Telegraph Club. At the beginning of several sections of the book, there are timelines that contain elements of the family's history, but also milestone moments in political history, both for China and for the US. For example, the end of the Korean War, the end of McCarthyism, and a variety of other cultural and historical moments, particularly around pressures in the government's quests for finding communists or homosexuals, deporting the former and arresting or harassing the latter. I didn't find this book to be a page turner, but at the same time, I loved being immersed in the setting. Malinda just did a really great job describing San Francisco, describing the family life. Felt like I was in the city. I felt like I was walking the streets with her and getting to experience Chinatown in 1954 and also just the Bay Area in general. I appreciated the scenes in the lesbian bar and as Lily and Kath connect with the lesbian community. I also loved seeing her excitement over math and rockets, and I thought the author did a really good job of setting Lily in this time in 1954, yearning to build rockets, yearning to be a part of the space program, speculating with her aunt who worked at the Jet Propulsion Lab, how soon would they make it to space? How soon would they make it to Mars, etc. That was really exciting. This book is really sweet and really smart. I thought it would be a little bit more of like a spy thriller. I think I'm maybe just not very good at reading blurbs sometimes because I thought it would be more focused on some of the threat of deportation against her father. That is certainly brought up as the US government is routing out communists and trying to put pressure on different people to try to find communist sympathizers and withholding immigration papers and deporting folks and all of that sort of thing. But this was more of a story of Lily and Kath really understanding who they are, coming out to themselves, to one another, and to their families. It was interesting to read this book after last month I had read Child 44, which was set in Stalinist Russia, and in that book, I was really reflecting on the overreaching of the government and trying to maintain a certain ideal of, well, we don't have crime here, even though, you turn on your neighbor, all of those sorts of things. And then to see, similar abuses of power, oppression of the marginalized by the US government in this book I mean, not that I didn't know that that occurred, but it was a really interesting juxtaposition. And I think it was good to remind us that we need to be careful about saying, well, that happened back then, or that happened over there, where it is happening here and it is happening probably where you are. And that's just one of the things that we want to pay attention to, is where are those without power being marginalized by those who are trying to get more. The last night of the Telegraph Club was told primarily from Lily's perspective. There were a few sections where the perspective shifted to either her mother or to her aunt in the past, and those I really enjoyed, but I think the author missed the potential of what could have been a stronger impact of maybe understanding. I guess I just didn't find the connection that really felt solid between those pieces that were in the other character's perspective and Lily's perspective. It may not have been intended to thematically bring those stories together. I know the author spoke about wanting to lift up the voices of people whose stories had been erased, and maybe that was part of it, which was definitely valuable. But I think that piece could have been stronger. So again, this was a really sweet, well done book. Young adult story of coming to understand one's own identity, finding love, facing conflict of a society that expects something different from you, both in terms of profession and gender roles and in terms of romantic attachments. So I definitely recommend it. I will give it 4.5 stars. I dock it just a little bit because I wish that the impact of the mothers and aunts perspectives had been a little bit stronger, and I wish the ending hadn't been quite so rushed. But overall, I think it was a fabulous book, and I think you will enjoy it. Next, I want to talk about The Guncle by Stephen Rowley. I'm reading this with my Pride group at work for our first ever LGBTQ plus book group, so it will be exciting. I did finish this, and I'll be discussing it in October with them, but I wanted to share it with you. Like last night at the Telegraph Club, this book also came out this year. This is a contemporary fiction set in Palm Springs and stars Patrick as the gay uncle who was a star on TV 4 years ago, but has taken a break from that, and he is grieving the death of his boyfriend Joe from a car accident. The beginning of the book, his dear friend Sarah, who wound up marrying his brother, she loses her long battle with cancer and she passes away, and the brother Greg confesses to Patrick that he has been struggling with an opioid addiction. He has checked himself in for rehab, and during the 90-day stint he is requesting that Patrick, single man living out in Palm Springs in a non-child-proof home, be the guardian for the 9-year-old and the 6-year-old. Patrick decides to go ahead and do this. Gay Uncle Patrick, or Gup, or the Guncle, as they call him, sees himself as Auntie Mame or the gay Mary Poppins. And there's some really sweet and funny scenes with the kids as he has banter or tells them jokes that they do a lot of eye rolling. They teach him a lot too, even about things like YouTube. There were some good scenes and story arcs as they tried to get through the summer in Palm Springs while the father was in rehab. This book very openly talks about grief. Patrick talking to his neighbor and pondering his own grief over the loss of Joe, as well as the loss of his dear friend Sarah, and also trying to figure out how to help shepherd these children through their grief. So I think some readers may find it a little bit schmaltzy. I am kind of, shall we say, allergic to sickly sweetness, and I didn't find it to be that. I found that it was just an honest discussion of what they were going through and how to help one another move through that very real thing that's happening for a lot of us. Thought the dialogue was great. I really loved the character arcs for many of the characters. I think that the story could have come across more as a surface level sickly sweet if the characters didn't have such depth and if we didn't get to see a journey and dimension in each of the characters. All in all, I thought this would be a fun group of people to hang out with, and I wound up really caring for all of them. And it did bring me almost to tears, which doesn't always happen, so that was good. I think this book was fabulous and I gave it 4.5 stars. And I think that if you're someone who is okay with that open conversation about grief and scenes with family life and children, then I think this would be a book that you would really enjoy. If that kind of thing would turn you off, then you probably wouldn't be into this. But I'm glad I read it and I definitely recommend it. So the Guncle was very much about family and children, and this book, the next one, advertises itself very explicitly as not intended for children. That is Center Center, a funny, sexy, and almost memoir of a boy in ballet by James Whiteside, which also came out this year. These are essays by James Whiteside, who is a principal dancer in American Ballet Theater, or ABT. He describes his childhood, about getting into dance and learning to be a better dancer and work his way towards his dream since childhood of becoming a dancer at the American Ballet Theater. He has an interesting childhood, and I love that his route to dance is not circuitous. He has to try and fail several times. He definitely doesn't have an easy path or just naturally good at everything the first time he tries it. So that's really good to hear his stories and reflections on that. He also talks about how a lot of assumptions about ballet is that all of the men are gay, and yet at the same time, like, all of the roles are really narrowly defined in heteronormative ways. So like Prince Charming and Sleeping Beauty and all, all of the other prince roles, etc. As a way to search for some creative expression alongside of that, then he created 2 personas, JB Dubs, which is a pop star persona, and Yoo-Hoo Betch, which is a drag queen, part of the Dairy Queens. One of the members is Milk, who was on RuPaul's Drag Race, and I guess they dated for 12 years. So I first ran across JB Dubs several years ago. That's the pop star persona, on a YouTube video called I Hate My Job, where he's wearing a white dress shirt with a black tie and booty shorts, and has 2 of his friends as backup dancers with him. And it's a song about how he hates his job and so forth. Oh, and I think they're wearing red heels. My coworkers and I loved it. We shared it all around and so forth. So as I was reading this, I went back and I rewatched that video, and then I was really disappointed to see that the T word, which is a transphobic slur, was in the video. I'm glad that he talks about it in the book, and he talks about how he didn't know for a long time that that was a slur, and honestly, I didn't either. I think that a lot of us in the community have been learning to do better and be better. He said that once he realized that he had messed up, he did a Twitter apology, and I know that he pulled down some of the other content that had that word in the title, but he did not change or pull down the song I Hate My Job. And he talks about leaving it up there kind of as a way for him to remember his misstep. He says, I mustn't relinquish my mind to comfort, to perpetual sameness. I have learned from my missteps and I continue to educate myself. My awakenings were the direct result of people informing me when I shared insensitive creations. I have gained wisdom from my shame. So I can't speak to whether or not leaving the video up with that lyric is the best way to move forward in that situation as a trans guy versus as opposed to a trans woman. I can't speak personally to what harm that causes. So I'd love to know your thoughts on both that apology and him leaving it up there. I am glad that he addressed it and that he wants to try to do better and be better. And he is right that none of us get it right all the time, and we all need to learn. There are words that we don't realize are offensive for communities that are not our own, and so hopefully we can always keep learning and educating one another. This book has some great anecdotes about his experiences as a drag queen, as well as the performances as JB Dubs, and also then describes some visits with his friends to Portland, Oregon. And so I was curious whether or not I would actually know any of the people that he met up with while here in Portland. Overall, I found this to be a quick, fun, interesting read, and I really enjoyed it, and I will give this 4 stars. The last book I want to talk about on this video was included on my TBR of 21 books I want to read in 2021, and that is The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin. This was first published in 1963, and I'd love to read some of the excerpts of the blurb to you. At once a powerful evocation of James Baldwin's early life in Harlem and a disturbing examination of the consequences of racial injustice, the book is an intensely personal and provocative document. It consists of 2 letters written on the occasion of the centennial of the Emancipation Proclamation that exhort Americans, both black and white, to attack the terrible legacy of racism. Described by the New York Times Book Review as a sermon, ultimatum, confession, deposition, testament, and chronicle, all presented in searing, brilliant prose, The Fire Next Time stands as a classic of literature. I agree, and you can see all of my tabs. I felt like at some point I was like almost tabbing every single page with pieces that I just wanted to remember, not just quotable quotes, but words that really inspired me to reflection and action. This is a book that I think should be required reading and is as important now in 2021 as it was when it was written in 1963. One of the things that struck me in his book was his critique of Christianity and statement that Christianity cannot claim to be the moral center or the ethical voice because of the atrocities that have been committed, including genocide, slavery, colonialization, etc. And I think that is absolutely true, and I hope that we can have an honest reckoning and repentance of all of that. Baldwin just speaks so many truths that we need to hear. One of them is about how we have conversations about equity and inclusion, but often that means just getting someone to be like us. How many of those conversations are really about, assimilation, where the ideal is the dominant race, class, gender, etc. From a U.S. perspective, Baldwin names the myth that many of us grew up with, that the nation was founded by freedom-loving patriots and that the U.S. is better than any other country, and calls us out to acknowledge that that cannot be true based on the history of the founding of this country, and calls on us to name our complicity in white supremacy. I'm not an expert and I have a lot to learn, but I definitely recommend this book and I give it 5 stars, maybe more than 5 stars. And I will be adding his book, Go Tell It on the Mountain, as his next book on my TBR. We're in a time where school districts and communities are trying to restrict, at least here in the States, I don't know about other countries, what is taught, and there's this fear of critical race theory and all of this nonsense. And we need to educate ourselves about the truths of who we are as human beings, the truths of what we have done as a country and as global citizens, and reckon with that and not let that be swept under the rug and pretend it never happened, which is, I think, the racist goal of these folks who don't want to let Black history be taught in schools. So to do your part, I definitely recommend that you read this book. I hope you enjoyed this and found something in those 4 books that you might like to add to your TBR, or maybe you've already read them and I'd love to know what you thought of them. I'm also always looking for recommendations, so please feel free to drop me a comment with any kind of book that you want to recommend. I'd love to hear from you. And as I lift up the Bridging Voices nonprofit and think about the power of music and the healing and unity that it can bring about, I'd love to know what songs are on your playlist as well. So please share that with us all in the comments below. And of course, feel free to like, subscribe, share, comment, all of the things. And until next time, happy reading.